Hello and good morning or evening, depending where you are, everyone. Welcome to Chief Architect Network Live. This is a series of conversations about maximizing the value of enterprise architecture and enterprise architecture practices in enterprises. We're really excited to be back again for the second time this week today. I'm one of your hosts, Brian Chambers. I'm the Chief Architect at Chick-fil-A, and I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today with a special guest that we'll get to introducing in just a moment. But as always, I have with me my friend Grant Eckert. Grant, how's it going? And tell everyone a little bit about you and about the Chief Architect Network.
You got it. So Grant Eckert, chairman and founder of the network. I'm a chief architect graduate from Medtronic, from Walgreens Boots Alliance, and most recently from Danaher. I also helped build the architecture practice at Low Home Improvement early in my career. A little bit about our network. Our mission is to maximize the value of architecture practices through our network that widens our perspectives and help us get a more holistic understanding of what's happening in the market, gives us best practices that we can share with each other, grows us as leaders, helps us develop our talent, and allows us to drive outcomes, which I think is one of the key differentiators we want to be focused on as architecture practices. We're a community-led organization free from direct selling, with our members as a network that is really no cost. It's really just about coming together as peers and something I'm extremely passionate about. So I'm actually going to take this moment and introduce a friend of mine and bring him onto the stage with us, Luca de Risi. And Luca is the CEO at Mega International, and someone that I've really connected with. We got to explore Paris together not too long ago. Luca, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, that was very cool. Thank you, Grant, for inviting me to the podcast. Thank you, Brian. Happy to be here with you guys and having a conversation live for once and not just between the two or three of us. Who am I? I'm Luca de Risi. I'm the CEO for Mega International. We are a leading EA vendor. We've been around for a long time, but changed so much many times. About myself, who am I? I'm 37. I'm a dad. I'm a cook. I'm a guitar player. These kind of things. I've been with Mega for quite some time too. Been 15 years already. Around the world. I lived in the US where you are. I managed the Singapore team in APAC. I'm back in Paris, France. And about Mega, if you want, Mega is it's a leading EA vendor, tool vendor. We've been around for 30 plus years, reinventing ourselves continuously. We are present in 10 countries. We have 100 partners, and we position as the EA tool for, say, enterprise transformation. We want to start you quickly on EA with quick onboarding and accelerate EA efforts, and then get you to a real transformation, connecting enterprise architecture with the rest of the world. Is it your data analysts, your business process owners, and risk managers?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great, Luca. We're excited to have a conversation today about how to make architecture stick. And I think that's something that's going to be really relevant. And you have a unique perspective on this because while you're not necessarily playing the role of a chief architect or an architecture practitioner, you get to see a lot of practices with all of the customers that you serve who are leading those practices. And so you maybe have one of the best perspectives on what works and what doesn't. So we're really excited to pick your brain about that today and want to tee you up with a first question here, which is, given that you see a lot of these practices, you see them, come and get built, you see them go away when they don't work and aren't effective. What do you think is the key to that? Like, what have you seen go wrong, and what makes EA actually not stick in the first place? And maybe we'll go to what works on the second part.
You're right. I've seen it happen. I've seen very successful architecture practices. I've always seen the less successful ones. Sometimes less mature. So I was in Asia and I saw them come and go. But even in the US, I remember being with Disney 10 to 12 years back, and a new CIO arrived, and the EA practice got completely stopped. 40 people, and then 2 years later it came back. So yeah, I've seen that happen. What can I say? I think the common symptoms, maybe there's two of them. One is sponsorship. The most successful EA practices are those who had a strong CIO sponsorship. And on the other side, those that were bottom up, they don't always stick. That's what happened at Disney. A new CIO came in and the whole EA practice was dismantled and then came back. The second thing I hear a lot is sentences like, please help us market ourselves internally. Help us demonstrate value. There's this thing of the business thinking that EA is too slow, EA is too much effort, maybe because of the way EA was done. And on the other side, I mean, chief architects, we know that it's mandatory for the company to do EA to sustain transformation and then have good governance of IT, right? But the business doesn't see it that way. And sometimes like, help us market ourselves internally. And it is about value demonstration, I think. I think it's about the way that it was done. For a long time, what I like to say is there was academic EA. EA based more on documentation, older frameworks. And I think that today, when you think about TOGAF 10, that's great. It's really value oriented. But when you work with just frameworks before, it was more about the jargon and the method than the outcomes. So I saw many architects work more on documenting the past and present and not focusing on the future. So it was all about the librarian effect, having all those books and data about what there was. But if you start modeling your business, IT, data, infrastructure, by the time you're done, the company has changed a couple of times. So yeah, I think that the way EA was done was what made it not sticky maybe in the past. That is changing. In fact, I see that it's becoming really mission critical. And if you want to finish on the last note, there's the way it was done a few years back, and then there's the role of the architect. I mean, yes, and Grind, we talked about this, but there's the key role of the architect. That's pretty standard all over. Managing the application landscape, at least giving visibility over it, and transforming the application landscape. When to migrate applications to cloud, how to manage application obsolescence, how to rationalize applications. Yeah, we hear those a lot. But after that, what is the role of the chief architect? It's really to be the advisor to the CIO or the right arm of the CIO. It's a strategic function, but it's not a single mandate. It's a consultant. So you can be a good consultant and have the right tools and drive the digital strategy with your CIO. But it's not one single thing you have to do. You have to adapt to the strategic priorities of your CIO, and that's not always easy. That may also be a reason why architecture didn't always stick. If you don't have a single reproducible use case to apply, you may do something good one day and not the next. What do you think about that?
We actually had a question from Anand come in that's on this vein. It'll be interesting to get your perspectives on the best practices we've used to tie OKRs with the EA objectives. I believe there's closer to this tie and better traction we will get. And that maybe as we kind of notice his question, we might save it for the end, but also kind of leading into, what do you notice, Luca, about those practices that are the most successful? When does it actually stick?
Look, the easy answer is the opposite of the pain points, right? Getting sponsorship, doing architecture the right way, not academic, but business focused. But to make it a bit more interesting, I think there's some use cases that beyond the scope of rationalization make EA very sticky. It's like to demonstrate value, to push the business outcomes, there are some use cases that usually bring traction. I can think of two right now. One is it sticks when there's an enterprise vision for transformation. Again, that's sponsorship right away. I was with a customer last week, and he was describing why he was successful with EA. And EA wasn't always there. It came and go actually with them. It's a major European manufacturing company. And right now they have an enterprise-wide transformation program driven by the CEO, of course, with the CIO involved. It's transformation. They're changing the business model, bringing in new technologies, adding some channels to do the way they do things. And there's rationalization, as usual. They have 85 ERPs within the different subsidiaries. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. That was more than I imagined. 85 ERPs. So yes, there's that rationalization component and the strategic component. And that makes, that's very sticky, because then it's not just an application management effort. Then it's EA to support transformation. So you're talking to business process people, you're talking to risk managers, you're talking to data managers, because if you want to carry out that transformation company-wide, it's not going to work in silos. And in fact, they actually started working with us with the business process side, and then went to the actual APM part. So that's one topic. I don't have to dive into everything right away, but company-wide transformation. Another one that I see right now, cyber resilience. That's also company-wide. Analysts say it's a #1 priority of CIOs, and architects have a key role, because what is resiliency? It's understanding the impact that IT risk has on the business, and how do you mitigate that? And architects, they know the backbone. I mean, you guys, you know the relationship between IT and the business, and how to make it stick. Well, give value to the business, and then right away it's going to be sticky. It's not IT for IT, it's IT for the business. And cyber resilience, it's another big use case. In Europe, we have DORA, the Operational Resiliency Act. And that's huge. Architects play a super key role, and we have a lot of demand right now to support that EA vision to DORA. It's risk and EA together.
That's good. Luca, I have a follow-up that's maybe a mix of the first two questions that we've discussed so far. I'm just curious, do you see a lot of enterprise architecture practices get focused on the wrong things, and so they're not actually adding value at all? Or are they getting the right things, but they're not influencing at the right levels? They're not able to actually show the value, or they're sort of like stuck lower in an organization perhaps, or some other factor? What are you kind of observing across the landscape in the different people you've talked to?
I haven't really seen architects work on the wrong use cases, but maybe cover too much at once. Typically, if you don't have the enterprise-wide transformation, then you need to demonstrate value. And the trick is, I haven't seen it work going from A to Z all at once. Mm-hmm. We have analyzed quite a few customers and came up with 4 maturity levels. Typically, we like to call it noisy to influential. An architecture practice will start at noisy. Noisy is where architects know it's important, but no one else does. Mm-hmm. And then there's useful. Useful, you've applied one use case. You've demonstrated value. Is it rationalization? Is it obsolescence? Is it cloud migration? You've demonstrated value, but it's still a push mode. Then you apply more use cases, and then you get to the trusted stage. Trusted is when the work done by EA is recognized, it's trustable. And then other departments come to you and say, oh, can you help me on this? May it be a risk-oriented, business-oriented use cases, supporting DevOps. And then you get to the final stage when it's influential, and then strategic decisions are made with EA. I mean, we'll ask EA first.
Yeah, that's really good, Luca. I think I want to just restate what you said about like trying to do too much, because I think that's an easy trap to fall into. Like, I know in my world personally, there's an insatiable demand for new technology and wanting to deploy it into the business to help with all kinds of different things. And it is impossible to do everything well. So you've got to be focused and selective, but it's a challenge. But I think you hit on something important there, that you need to focus your energy on some areas that are going to do all the things you talked about, like give you successes, build trust, et cetera. Really great insight. So just wanted to play that back.
I mean, look, I think architects need to do a lot. I think it's even more today, it's a critical role, it's a strategic role to help design and implement the digital strategy. What I say is not that it shouldn't do more, it's that it should start small to demonstrate value when you don't have that big sponsorship to start with. You need to demonstrate value in a push mode and then get to the pull mode in a second step. And it's all about business value. I saw someone commented on that. Business value, but use cases. What is the first use case you're going to start working on to demonstrate quick, and quick is important, quick value, so that then you can get into the more strategic ones.
I got a fun one for you, because we're talking about, you just kind of are bridging into this, but let's talk about that. What are the less sexy EA topics we have to make room for? What do you think, Luca?
The least sexy ones?
Yeah. compare it with kind of the ones that are just kind of cleaning your room, vacuuming the carpet, mowing the lawn. What do you think?
I was reading the comment right now from Daryl and Lisa about relationships, and yeah, I wanted to react because it is about the soft skills are super important, because yes, demonstrating value, but you also need to know how. I had the chance to have lunch with Lisa the other day in Boston, and yeah, what she did is smart. She started speaking with 110 executives to start building the position. Absolutely, I agree. This is how to identify the first use cases, the soft skills, the relationships. So I just avoided your question, Grant. But how about you help me?
You don't get to be CEO without being able to kind of do the matrix move with the bullets.
How about you help me with the dirty tasks not recognized?
Okay, I will. I think you have to do the current state work when you know where the strategy is trying to transform. You have to at least do the work to understand what we have today. Otherwise, you're building bridges, but you don't have sort of the land side going onto the island. You're not really, you're kind of missing some important pieces. And when you actually try to connect, you actually maybe made some assumptions about what you actually have in your environment. So it's not sexy, and I don't recommend doing an all-in current state assessment. But if you know where you're trying to go, you better know where you are in the scope of those changes. What do you think?
I think that's where I come in, as a tool provider, because our goal is to help you accelerate that less sexy part of the job. We bring automation, integrations with CMDBs, with artificial intelligence, and what we did, with Mega is we built AI to help you automatically build the EA baseline, and then we connect your applications to the business capabilities. I'll give you a demonstration one day, and we try to automate the whole of APM so that then you can focus on the more sexy parts.
Natash, that's hilarious. That's awesome. And I guess let me.
I would never say that relationship building is unsexy. I was really referring to Grant's comment that building the inventory is not the most sexy part.
That's absolutely right. And let me ask you this one too. How are practices evolving, Luca? As you kind of zoom out, you've been in this industry probably longer than me, and I'm curious. What have you seen over your time looking at architecture practices coming and going? What's different about what you see today?
Yeah, EA has and is still evolving. Today, I think the big change I've seen in the last 5 years is that EA has become mission critical. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do.
But if you spoke to CIOs 5 to 10 years ago, some said they needed EA, some didn't. And sometimes some arrived and said, oh, now I'm going to stop doing EA because I don't need that kind of documentation. I think that has changed. When you speak to CIOs today, of course they need EA. Why? Because change is so fast, because you have emerging technologies on AI, RPA, cloud migrations. I mean, you need to know what you have to handle that. Like you said before, understanding the present is key to managing the future. EA for that is mission critical. So that's a big change I've seen. And then the scope of EA, I think, is changing. EA, take 15 years back, it was all about modeling, diagramming to represent all the intricacies of the organization. Sometimes it still is, but maybe on a more focused area. It was about all diagramming. Then it shifted to the opposite, all APM, all application portfolio management. All you need is your inventory of applications so that you can manage your applications. I think that EA now is evolving again towards supporting other functions and managing transformation. So it's all about business transformation. And I like to say that EA is the nervous system. You understand the nervous system of the company. You understand the flows, that's the data. You understand the business, that's your capabilities and processes. And you understand your muscles, that's your applications. And yeah, you understand IT, you understand the nervous system of the company, and then you can operate. You can understand what goes wrong, what goes better, and you can have that role of being the advisor to the CIO, because you have that understanding.
That's really great. I love the metaphor. Grant, there was a question that came through from Tim. You got it up on the screen here. Luca,
Yeah.
curious if you have any thoughts on this. I think we all probably see this a lot in our organizations. So the question was, how do you deal with shadow IT organizations that want to operate in silos? Any thoughts about that?
Many. I think a lot. Operating in shadows, maybe different CIOs in the company, different divisions, not wanting to share with corporates. It could be, I see some nodding. It could be business and IT wanting to work in silos, different departments were wanting to work in silos. You know, less now, I would say. There is more this idea of federated management, but risk management typically never wanted to share with EA or vice versa, actually. Sometimes it's difficult to have the business process team working with the EA team. So yeah, I've seen it a lot. What can help? I've seen a case, quite interesting, a big customer in the US, the shame factor. So actually what the chief architect did was fun. He made dashboards of the obsolescence status of the different divisions, went and showed that to the CIOs of the divisions in the board meeting. And then there was no choice. You know, they had to do something about it. It's a bit ballsy, but that was a fun story. Another thing is, you know, the typical tricks. Put the dollar value on everything you do to demonstrate value and get them to work together, and getting the CIO sponsorship. I mean, really, what I've seen always work is working with the CIO, building the digital strategy together, because that's going to help you get his mandate for everyone to align.
It's good. Just as an anecdote, I know that you know, the world has changed. When I started my career, I think most of your people who were technology practitioners and who could do things for themselves had some sort of IT background. We've got a whole generation now of people in the workforce who grew up with cell phones and computers, and you know, things like building little automation routines and you know, even building simple systems with basic tools has become pretty accessible and pretty unintimidating to a lot of business folks. So all that to say, I mean, a digital native generation in the workforce, I think, is going to mean that this idea of shadow IT is going to explode in terms of scope. It's not something we're going to fix and it's going to go away. It's only going to get, quote, worse. So I think we've got to figure out how do we enable, I mean, there's potentially huge amounts of business value in more people who can self-serve. So how do we do that and do it well, maintain a cohesive enterprise architecture as we go, but also enable these folks, you know, to be productive and do the things they need to do. So it's going to be a really interesting environment.
That's fair on the shadow IT part. I think technology also plays a role. Because yes, there's the federated part and fighting the silos, but then there's also a way to discover shadow IT. That's when you discover your servers to understand all the technologies you've got deployed there, and then you can use that AI I was talking about to make sense and classify the information. You can normalize it, but then you can also discover your networks and see what's out there being used by the business. And what happens sometimes is there's applications being used by the business, but they're not even called applications; they're called services. Everything is a service, actually. So SaaS is a service, right? So to avoid shadow IT and shadow SaaS, technology can also help.
Awesome. Well, we have one more question for you before we go to Q&A from our listeners. So you got a bunch of chief architects, enterprise architects, and others listening. What sort of parting advice would you give them? What should they be thinking about in their roles as leaders? What do you got for them?
Few things I think are the tips I would give to any customer and architect I meet. What I've seen work the best: go step by step. That's what we said at the beginning. Focusing on use cases and business value, not the academic approach. The soft skills to sell yourself internally. Quantifying the value, because a lot of it is value demonstration. We said it earlier, how to demonstrate an ROI, market yourself internally. And I think quantifying the value that you bring, it's easier when you talk about rationalization, because then you can talk about retired applications, save consulting costs, save times in meetings, thanks to your tool or your practice. It's a bit harder when it gets to the risk that you've mitigated because it didn't happen. But there's ways where you can try to put a dollar value on the risk impact, on all the money you saved. That's good for ROI. Yeah, and in the end, I guess I have to say, use a tool like ours to help to accelerate all the unsexy parts and focus on the best.
Absolutely, that's great. I mean, I'll echo that having some sort of tool, if you're getting sizable in a practice, it can be a massive force multiplier and can help tremendously. So that's really great. Grant, any comments to wrap up that section?
How awesome is this? Like, I just
Great.
absolutely love the fact that we're chatting with somebody who's seen practices come and go as an industry expert in this space, sells to us and understands our space, while we have a whole community of folks in our network chiming in and enriching the conversation. And I'm really excited to take that to the next step and actually bring some of these folks on and pull some of their questions up and really dive in deep.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do next. So the benefit of doing these events live is that we can actually engage with our audience as we go and make sure that we're hitting the things that you're thinking about and that you're wondering about. So if you're out in the chat, feel free to keep those questions coming and we'll try and address them. And we have a couple guests from the Chief Architect Network that we've invited in to come ask some questions live. So let's go to that, Grant.
Farhan, jump in. What's your question?
Hey, Brian.
Hey, guys. I was going to begin with just one question, but I've got two which are kind of related. Should EA, where is a good place, a modern place, a current place where EA should be reporting? And kind of what I'm thinking about is another way to look at it. That is, should the EA practice report to the CIO going forward? That's one part. The other one is, what does a modern EA practice look like that is constantly evolving and changing and being vital?
And the question could also be, should the CIO still focus on IT or extend and be called maybe Chief Digital Officer? There's a lot of discussions around that too. It's a big question, Farhan. I agree with you. I think EA, yes, should report to the CIO, Chief Digital Officer, because the core, which is managed by EA, is still digital. Today, IT is the business. You don't do banking without IT. You don't do insurance without IT. It's all about applications. So having control over your digital, which is the muscles of the company, that's important, and that is the role. I think that's the number one role of architects. So I think it makes sense that EA reports to the CIO or the Chief Digital Officer. But what's important to me is that EA isn't stuck in the silo of IT, because you don't manage IT for IT, you manage IT for the business. So what's important is the relationship you have with the COO and the CFO, and then you talk about cost, and then you can present the value to the business. And then you have other roles that are connected to EA. You have business analysts, you have business architects, you have process architect, and those won't report to the CIO, and they're connected to EA. So yeah, I think it's the right place. What's important is the way it's done and the business value and relationships. Please repeat your second question, Farhan.
Certainly. So that was,
before you do, Farhan, tell everyone who you are. They may not know you.
Look me up on LinkedIn. That's a quick, short answer to that one.
There you go.
Okay.
Connect with him. He's a smart guy.
Yeah. So the second part of my question is, well, this is actually the main question that I had. What does a modern enterprise architecture practice look like? I know that's a big topic area in itself, and it's going to be context sensitive. But what are your thoughts? What does that look like? And what we're looking for is vitality, not a capability that is not seen as a luxury or a not so vital thing, or that's a capability that nobody's going to miss if it's not there. That kind of thing. What does that look like? What does that look like from something that is constantly evolving and vital? What does that modern enterprise architecture practice look like?
It's funny because it's something that is continuously evolving, in a digital world that is continuously evolving too. So it's a tricky one. But yes, what's the modern architecture practice? I think the modern architecture practice is focused on the future, not on the past. The legacy architecture practice was focused on the past. It was focused on documentation. And that was one of the problems for demonstrating value, because yeah, it's the unsexy part that, Grant, you referred to earlier. It's documenting the existing application landscape or infrastructure landscape, but that's not enough value to demonstrate. The modern architecture practice focuses on the transformation, and that's what business capabilities haven't always been used. Everyone talks about it, but when you look into EA practices, not everyone uses business capabilities. Understanding the processes of the organization to the level of the level of detail that you need. And there's a part, to be modern, you also need the right technologies. If you do it all in Excel and PowerPoint, it's not that modern. There's ways today to automate that inventory and focus on the future. So those are a few things, but maybe Grant, help me out on this one. What do you think is more modern?
I think it's going to sound so trite, but I think it's being outcome centric and just noticing Tim's comment and taking advantage of that, right? What's more outcome centric than also owning additional pieces? I'm starting to see more of that, where chief architects are starting to own like the AI, especially the early pipeline of how we start to take what's going to matter in the environment and start to bring that into execution and incubate that a little bit further into implementation teams and help them along the way. I think being outcome centric is one of the big shifts that maybe you compare 10 years ago. It wasn't quite as deliberate. It wasn't quite as bold. But now, if you're not outcome centric, people are patient, but only so patient, and your time is kind of ticking if you aren't able to start to show that value. There's more I could say, but I'd keep it simple. Farhan, thanks for joining us. I'm going to invite another guest to step in. This is Mark. Mark, if you could introduce yourself quickly, another member of our network.
Sure. Hi, everybody. And Luca, fantastic so far. Thank you to Grant, Brian, Farhan, everyone else who's here. I'm the VP of Architecture at WorkHuman. It's a famous company in Ireland, one of the unicorns. And I have a lot of experience. I write on marklevel.ie, a blog about architecture as well. You just mentioned, Luca, about how important how important transformation is, and we should think about transformation. So I suppose the question I have is, how much should architects actually influence or even create that transformation? There's a sense that I have, and maybe you share it or maybe you don't, that if we're too passive, we become kind of order takers in many ways, and we don't necessarily deliver the value that we know we could to an organization. If you're too passive? Yeah, if we're too passive. So if we're not, I believe architects should have a hand in creating the transformation strategy, the overall strategy itself. Because if we don't, we can be seen as a passive agent rather than an active agent of change. I agree. I think if I had to describe in one sentence the role of the modern architect, that would be designing the digital strategy with the CIO and implementing it. So yeah, I do agree on that. And indeed, yeah, it's not passive. The thing is, there's a question of trust. Grant, we were talking about that earlier. It's the trust that as a chief architect, you can build with your CIO. Because you're not going to build a digital strategy if you don't have trust. And the CIO doesn't know they can confirm. They can trust you to do things. And that's where, I mean, with the experience that you have, with demonstrating value on use cases, if you haven't done it before, then yeah, that is what will make you more proactive, I guess, and influence. In the end, it's about being influential. Mm-hmm. And is there a danger if we stop just at the CIO that we limit our sphere of influence? So should we try and get even wider than that? If I go back to the way we normalized it, noisy, useful, trusted, influential, up to trusted, I think the CIO is the right target. Mm-hmm. Because the first use cases that will be most accessible to demonstrate value, building the baseline, rationalization, obsolescence, cloud migration,
governance and transformation, if you interoperability of applications, those are pretty much business oriented, but still IT centric. And then when you are trusted, then it's easier to go to the auditors and say, if you want to run faster audits, well, use the processes and IT I've described. Go to the CISO. A big use case today to become influential is around cybersecurity. And I know that may not be top of mind for all the architects, but we've run a survey around cybersecurity. It's the number one priority of CIOs. Budgets are skyrocketing around cybersecurity. And more than security, cyber resiliency. And what's the difference? The difference is that cybersecurity is risk and compliance, right? It's understanding your regulation, risks, and the controls you put in place. That's the CISO's work. But then what is resiliency? Resiliency is the consequence of that IT risk on the business. Now you need to understand how your applications relate to your processes, to your capabilities. What's the data? Is the data at risk? And that cannot be done with your CMDB. It cannot be done with Excel. It cannot be done just with the CISO. Beam, there you go from IT to the business in one step. You become, I think that is the one of the key steps today to be influential, working on cyber resiliency. And honestly, budgets are huge when it comes to resiliency. If you are in a financial institution, even more, because then you have the DORA, Operational Resiliency Act in Europe, you have the equivalent in the US, the equivalent in Singapore, and now you have the regulation, you have the budget, and you have an impact at the board level. I wouldn't start with that. I think it's ambitious, but that would definitely be my second or third use case.
Thank you.
We got a related comment here from Lisa around the shadow IT risk related to cyber. Do you have any comments on that, Luca?
Define the risk of shadow IT with respect to cyber. Yeah, shadow IT often relates to the least expensive applications. You know you're using Salesforce, you know you're using ServiceNow, right? But the business may be using some subscriptions for AI. They'll be using some subscriptions for marketing, services, and that's what you don't know. So most of the shadow IT is not the big infrastructure mainframe, it's the small things. So that's less visible to the CFO, but the risk there for security is data, because you don't know what data is transitioning there. You don't know the technologies being used. Is it compliant with the company standards? Does it have Log4j? That's the problem. So there's a problem with the smaller applications and the data, the privacy also. So you get into regulatory risk, into vulnerabilities, etc. So yeah, shadow IT, shadow SaaS in particular. And that's where some tools that discover your networks can come in handy.
I love it. Well, Mark, thanks for
Would
stepping in.
you agree, Lisa, on that?
What's that?
I was asking if Lisa would agree on the response.
Let's see if she comments. I'll post it out there. Lisa, give us your thoughts. Mark, did you have any follow-ups?
No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Than's for joining us. It was great having you on. Well, now let's kind of go into a little bit of a lightning round per se, and grab our comments that have come in. I think there's an interesting one from Linda that came in a while back. Now, you did touch on it a bit with your Disney story, but I thought it was such a rich question. I wanted to give this some airtime. So if you could comment on the contemporary problem we face out there with the inconsistent, too narrow definition of EA. All too many leaders think about EA as a tech stack, and their endorsement may be there, but only in the technical space rather in the biz and emerging transformational space. I live this personally. I see it. I'm really curious what someone who's kind of watched multiple practices come and go sees in this space. Luca, what do you think?
Leave the question on the screen. It's a long one. Yeah, EA seen as technology or too much IT and not enough involved in business, emerging transformation. I fully agree. I think it's a necessary evil that you start there, because that's often the place to start to demonstrate value. Being strong at rationalization, shifting those 85 ERPs to maybe a handful, one, if anything. So I think it's a necessary evil to prove your value on on the IT side, but definitely there's use cases that allow you to go towards the business, and then you can work on process automation. You can work and business. There's no such thing today as just business or just IT, because IT is the business. I mean, I don't know any business process today that doesn't use software or technology, right? And that's where EA is necessary to the business, is because you understand how to improve the business, right?
Absolutely. Actually, here's a question from Daryl. What are your thoughts on the relationship between architecture and procurement?
Good one. Architecture and procurement. Okay, so one thing for sure, it's very hot in here. I don't know if you noticed, but
It's not bad
it's
in my
extremely hot where I am.
state.
Architecture and procurement. One key thing is when you manage the application landscape, you manage there's the as is, then the to be, and there's the should be. So architects, very often you say what should be, what is allowed to be, what are the allowed technologies, and what applications should be there. Then they may be deployed 100 times on the servers, but there's that one application that should be there. If you own the certification of applications, right, that's a common word. If you own the application should be landscape, then the relationship with procurement is that any request for a new application or a new technology should go through EA. And then you can say, sorry, we already have 5 of those. Please use one of the ones we have instead of a new one. I mean, the 85 ERPs is a bit extreme, but there's so many organizations that own everything under the sun. That's a first element of answer. I'm sure there's more, but EA and procurement, that's definitely one of them.
I love that. Yeah, and I love this comment from Vikas too. The goalposts keep moving, and it's hard to educate on the value of EA, especially when it keeps moving around. I'll actually turn to you, Luca. What would you like to kind of go off on a tangent on? We brought you all over. Like, what question do you wish the Architect Network was asking you right now?
Well, maybe I can think of what I would like to ask you, Grant, or the chief architects. Honestly, I think your network is amazing. I've told you before, because you've managed to gather the most experienced architects in the US and more. That's quite impressive. And I want to ask you, I mean, today, what are, beyond the core scope of rationalization, obsolescence, what are your top priorities? I mean, what is on your strategic roadmap as a chief architect for 2024? Is that artificial intelligence? Is that security? I'd love to hear from you on that.
Well, I would like to speak for the community. And what's really kind of fun is we did a really simple exercise in Miro, and we mapped out what we thought was important to us across all of our scopes. And we had some key things emerge, right? And of course, artificial intelligence is on every single one of our dashboards, right? But there were other things that popped out that were a little bit more what you would expect, right? Like from the classic perspective. Many of us are wondering how we go about governance, right? How we look at structuring our organization and how we step into that. There's lots of work in the data space, particularly as a key enabler of AI. There's an interest both in doing the business architecture, but also earning that seat at the table. It's not easy, and it's usually kind of a game of will. And actually, one of my colleagues out on the other side of the pond had one of the absolute best practices I'd ever seen. Way to go, Gareth Lewis. Shout out, brother. And frankly, it's really only served at the pleasure of the organization and the CIO. If you end up with a different leadership, a different appetite in the business for who's in the room, it all can evaporate so quickly, and it might not be anything that the practice has done. It just can be changing attitudes. So the one thing I notice is there's this desire that if I do X and Y and Z, I will get outcome A and B and C. And that just isn't the reality. The reality is there's a massive amount of this work that is the soft skills, the executive influence, the networking, and the creating of opportunities, which is why I believe so strongly in this network, because as we learn together, we're building those skills together, which is something I'm super passionate about.
That makes a lot of sense. You said a lot of things, and you ended up with the soft skills and the relationships. I've seen the data part very much. Still getting out of the comfort zone of the application landscape, and the data part is very true. I mean, there's been a boom recently in the market of metadata management, because when you want to manage AI, you need to understand your data, your metadata, your databases, your unstructured data, and it cannot be done without architects. That's another big area where architects play a key role, not on the core job, but on helping build the business glossary in a much faster way, because you know the business. Those tools, they know how to scan databases and do some data lineage, but it doesn't make any sense if you don't have the business perspective, the business capabilities, the business processes. Yeah, and that's one big thing that we're also working on, how to tighten data governance and enterprise architecture. Yeah, I fully agree with that.
I love it. Well, this time has flown. I can't thank everyone enough for joining us with our Chief Architect Network conversation with Luca de Risi. And thank you for being here and being a supporter of our community, Luca. It's been amazing building together and learning together. For those of you who don't know, Luca may have helped a little bit with our logo design. Some late night messages between the two of us. He's like, it needs to be simpler. It was kind of fun building that out. So we're right at time. So I want to, keep honest to the schedule. Luca, any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Thank you so much for inviting me, Grant and Brian. Nice speaking, and I love the interactions. Everyone speaking out and asking questions. It's a great forum you've created. Well done.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. Reach out to Luca on LinkedIn to connect, or myself. And if you're a chief architect, connect with me and let's see about getting you into the network with us. We've got about 260 peers globally, and it continues to grow. So it's all about trying to find those points of connection and have these kinds of conversations together to increase outcomes. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day and look forward to connecting soon.